We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Zayin Amid Beis Meseches Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 17b. On the previous Zamud, Rav Huna said that the only time we say there's a neder b'soch neder is, let's say you have a situation where a person says Hareini Nazir Hayom, today I'll be a Nazir, and then he says I'm going to make, and then he makes another Nazirus Hareini Nazir L'macher. The next day he makes a Nazirus. So since he's adding a day, so then we say that second Nazirus is Chal. That's when you can have a neder b'soch neder. But if the person Hareini Nazir Hayom, so the second Nazirus would not be Chal. But the Gemara asked, if that's the case, why didn't the Mishnah make that distinction? Why did the Mishnah make a distinction between Neder and Shvuah in this regard? They should have made a distinction within Neder in this regard, that there's a difference between Hareini Nazir Hayom, and Hareini Nazir L'macher, Ein Neder B'soch Neder. They could have said, again, there is a scenario where we say Ein Neder B'soch Neder according to Rav Huna. And the Gemara says, Kasha, that is indeed difficult according to Rav Huna. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Yesh Neder B'soch Neder, Ve'en Shvuah B'soch Shvuah. Again, it says there is a Neder within a neder. You can have a neder on a neder, but you can't have a shvuah within a shvuah. Hey Chidami, what's the case? Ilema d'amar Hareini Nazir Hayom, Hareini Nazir L'macher. Now, if you're going to say like Rav Huna, that the case of the Mishnah is where the person says Hareini Nazir Hayom and Hareini Nazir L'macher, and since he added a day with the second Nazirus, that's why it's Chal. So then how do you understand the contrast in the Mishnah? T'chevasa gabe shvuah. So you're going to have a similar case that does not work by shvuah. What would be a similar case? Shelo ochel ta'enim. Let's say he makes a shvuah not to eat figs. V'chazer v'yamar shvuah shelo ochel anovim. And then he says another shvuah, he says a second shvuah not to eat grapes. That's going to be the similar situation by Shavua. But why would that not be Chal? Amai lo chola Shavua al Shavua. Why would the Shavua not be Chal? The second Shavua is completely different than the first one. The first one's about figs, and the second one is about grapes. So that can't be what's going on in the Mishnah. Rather, what would be a scenario where one shvuah can't be chal on the other shvuah? The case must be he takes shvuah number one not to eat figs, then he says again a shvuah not to eat figs, so the second one's not going to be chal because it's just a repeat. But then the similar case would have to be by nazirus that it does work. What would be the case? The Amar Hareini Nazir Hayom, an identical case. The person says I'm going to be a nazir today, I'm going to be a nazir today. And then it seems like it's saying there is a neder b'soch neder, it is chal, and kasha Rav Huna, that's difficult according to Rav Huna. So how does Rav Huna explain our Mishnah? And the Gemara answers, Amalach Rav Huna. Rav Huna will say to you, Masnisan damar Hareini Nazir Hayom, Hareini Nazir L'macher. No, when our Mishnah said that there's yesh neder b'soch neder, the case was where he says, I'm a Nazir today, I'm a Nazir tomorrow. The Chavasa gabe Shvuah, but you had the wrong parallel by Shvuah. The parallel case by Shvuah would be as follows. First he takes a Shvuah that he's not going to eat figs. Then he takes a second Shvuah that he's not going to eat figs and grapes. So there he's repeated the figs, but he's also added on the grapes, and there we're saying that's not going to be Chal. The lo chayla, that will not be chal according to Rav Huna. But the Gemara says, is that really true? V'amar Rabba, but didn't Rabba say, Shvuah shelo ochel ta'enim v'chazer v'yamar shvuah shelo ochel ta'enim v'anovim. Let's say a person takes a shvuah not to eat figs, then he takes another shvuah not to eat figs and grapes. V'achal ta'enim v'hifresh carbon. Now, if he eats the figs, separates a carbon, v'chazer v'yachal anovim, and then goes ahead and eats the grapes, so havelhu anovim chatzi shir. So the anovim there, it's considered a chatzi shir because it's only half of the oath. Ve'in meviim carbon al chatzi shir. You don't bring a carbon on a chatzi shir. But if you disregard the chatzi shir issue, let's say you have a case simply asking whether the second shvuah was chal, and the person goes ahead and he eats the te'enim and the anovim, so then apparently it would be chal. Al mahecha damar shvuah shelo ochel te'enim. You see from this case of Rabbah that if a person takes a shvuah not to eat figs, v'chazer v'yamar shvuah shelo ochel te'enim v'anovim, then he takes another shvuah not to eat figs and grapes, so it is going to be chal. Migo dechal shvuah al anovim, since the shvuah is chal on the grapes, chayla nami al te'enim, so it's also chal on the figs. But again, you do see that the shvuah is chal in this case. Rabbah was just saying that if you have a situation where he ate the figs and separated a carbon and then he goes and eats the grapes, so it's a chatzi shir. But if it wasn't a case of chatzi shir, the second shvuah would be chal according to Rabbah. And so therefore that would be a question on Rav Huna, because Rav Huna is saying that the second shvuah would not be chal. And the Gemara says very simply, Rav Huna lo svir like a Rabbah. You'll just have to say that Rav Huna does not hold like Rabbah. He doesn't agree with Rabbah in this regard, and he would say that the second shvuah is not chal in this case. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have the following question. The Tosefta says, Misha Nazar Shtei Naziris. Let's say somebody promises 2 terms of Naziris. Mones Rishon, he counts the first one, he goes through the first 30 days, Ve'ifrish carbon, and he separates the carbon. V'nishal Aleh, but then he asks a Chacham to undo that Naziris. So then also, Lo Shniya B'Rishona, so the second Naziris that he promised, that will actually count that he did it already, because that first Naziris was already undone. He never had to do anything, but he did a Naziris. He served an entire 30 days, so to speak, so he'll have fulfilled the second Naziris with doing the first one. And the Gemara now says, Hey Chidami, what exactly is the case over here? If the case is he said, I'm going to be a Nazir today, and I'm going to be a Nazir tomorrow, so the second Nazir is actually added a day, it went a day later. So am I also Lo Shniya B'Rishona, so why would the second one count by serving the first one? There's still an additional day. Ha'ika Yomi Yaseir, there's still that extra day that he hasn't taken care of, so he hasn't finished the second Naziris yet. Elab Shita, rather it's obvious. Damar Hareini Nazir Hayom, Hareini Nazir Hayom. The case in the Tosefta must be that he said, I'm a Nazir today, I'm a Nazir today, and it must have been Chal. This seems to be a refutation of Rav Huna, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Ches Amud Aleph.